So, I was on a group call recently with a bunch of 80s babies, and they were discussing delightfully traumatic movies from their childhoods. And I caused them quite a shock when I described Lord of the Rings, specifically the Fellowship of the Ring and Boromir's death, as my equivalent to Artax in the Swamps of Sadness from the Neverending Story. And recently I was blessed enough to have the extended versions of the trilogy screened on Discord with a really fun chat alongside it, where we could gush and savour all the greatness that cinematic Middle-earth had to offer. And it made me remember just how formative that trilogy was for me as a child. I can even remember how I felt when I first saw a trailer, having no idea what it was and being amazed that a film like that even existed. And even with the trauma of Boromir's death, thinking Gandalf wasn't coming back and assuming Merry and Pippin being carried off meant they were dead too, a childhood obsession was born. Books were read, the BBC audio drama was listened to over and over again, the Two Towers and Return of the King games were played, I subscribed to this series of magazines that came with a different figurine each week, and this is how many I ended up with. I even made a diorama of Eowyn's big moment as part of a school project.
I am no man.
And even though I grew up and my tastes changed, with me not being much of a Tolkien-phile and in fact only seeing the Hobbit movies for the first time last year, I still carry a fondness for it all. And obviously if you clicked on this video you saw the title, so you must be wondering why out of the entire amazing selection of characters that my favourite is... In fact, I didn't even know it myself until recently. Restricting it to just the Fellowship, Boromir is my guy, and Aragorn and Legolas are cool too, with Merry also being a delight. But there has definitely always been a stigma towards Arwen, especially since out of the 3 female characters in the trilogy, she's in comparison to Galadriel, who's kind of like all 9 muses rolled into one for the amount of work she's inspired, and Eowyn, who of course gets to be the badass who kills the Witch King. And yet Aragorn turns down her in favour of Arwen? The pretty girly girl who doesn't do anything beyond fall in love? Well, seeing as how I've spent several hours of my life defending the virtues of Disney princesses often dismissed as weak because of their femininity, and a video I made on Princess Aurora from Sleeping Beauty helped inspire this one, shall we get down to it? Quite famously, Arwen only briefly appears in the books, with all the canon information about her life being revealed in the appendices, specifically the tale of Aragorn and Arwen, which is framed as a story written after Aragorn's death by Eowyn and Faramir's grandson. In it, Aragorn first comes across her walking through the woods as he sings The Lay of Luthien, a song about an immortal elf maiden who falls in love with a human man and chooses a mortal life to marry him, and he then of course sees Arwen as his Luthien, fittingly enough as she's one of her descendants, and by the way, Luthien was a total badass. Her father is Elrond, who is a half-elf, and likewise so is she, meaning they have men in their ancestry too, and can choose between elvish immortality or else a mortal human life, and he'll only allow them to marry if Aragorn becomes King of Gondor, since he knows Aragorn will either become the greatest of his line or else be lost to darkness. After the One Ring is destroyed, they marry and Arwen remains behind in Middle-earth as her father sails to Valinor along with Galadriel and Celeborn, who are her grandparents by the way, and her giving up her seat on the last ship allows for Frodo to go. They have a son and 2 daughters and are together for 120 years before Aragorn dies of old age, and Arwen leaves everyone to go to the now empty Lothlorien, where she eventually dies of a broken heart, just like Luthien. Tolkien considered the tale of Aragorn and Arwen the most important of the appendices, with him reportedly writing in a letter, "The passage over sea is not death. I am only concerned with death as part of the nature, physical and spiritual, of man, and with hope without guarantees. This is why I regard the tale of Aragorn and Arwen as the most important of the appendices. It is part of the essential story. Arwen does not appear in any of the animated adaptations, and she was at one point said to be cut from the live-action one too, or rather, when they weren't sure if they would even get the 2 movies they were pushing for, one character would basically a composite of Arwen and Eowyn. But as the history books say, when Peter Jackson pitched Lord of the Rings to New Line Cinema, they said, "This is 3 movies." And so we got adaptations of all 3 books, and Arwen and Eowyn were separate characters once again. And it's funny, but some shenanigans in the casting department are partly to thank for why cinematic Arwen became such a beloved character, as it might be hard for younger viewers to comprehend that none of the principal cast members were what you'd consider A-list. Elijah Wood had been something of a child star with the Huck Finn movie, but as a teenager he was more likely to be in the ensemble, like The Ice Storm or The Faculty. Sean Astin was a character actor whose only really notable role was The Goonies when he was 13, Viggo Mortensen had G.I. Jane maybe, but that was being trashed and getting Razzie nominations. Sir Ian was respected, sure, but hardly mainstream, and the first X-Men movie hadn't even come out when he was cast. So producers wanted at least one Hollywood star as a sort of safety net. And some of the stars who turned down roles can be hilarious to think about. Nick Cage turning down Aragorn, Sean Connery turning down Gandalf, and Uma Thurman turning down Eowyn. Kate Winslet was also courted for that role, and possibly Arwen too, but she wanted to avoid big blockbusters and multi-film commitments after the nightmare that was the Titanic production, and ultimately Eowyn went to the unknown Miranda Otto, and we're all very happy about that. But they still needed their star.
I lied to you too.
Liv Tyler had become something of an it girl in the mid-90s, first being known as the daughter of Aerosmith lead singer Steve Tyler, and she appeared in the video for Crazy, but she properly broke out as an actress with the 1996 art house drama Stealing Beauty, and had notable roles in acclaimed films like That Thing You Do, as well as the Michael Bay blockbuster Armageddon, but it was the historical comedy Plunkett and McLean and her performance in that led to a little phone call.
Some things are certain.
Her casting was not received well at all. First, because she was deemed too young at 22 to believably embody an immortal elf maiden, and because she seemed far too contemporary. In fact, here's a quote from a fan site describing her as miscast. I think anyone can see the huge mistake that was made in the casting of Arwen. The blatant disregard shown in the casting of an ancient, mysterious, worldly being with the latest Hollywood hot tamale irritates me to no end. Tyler is far too young to give Arwen the dignity and grace she deserves. I just think she is far too modern an actress to pull off the role of an ancient elf, or for that matter, an ancient anything. Well, that aged well, but in fairness, it's not as though fans of the books didn't have cause to worry, as the first preview showed a shot of Arwen brandishing a sword, and on-set pictures of Liv Tyler in armour fighting at the Battle of Helm's Deep had already leaked, leading to fans mockingly calling her Liv Tyler Warrior Princess or Zeen Arwen. And funnily enough, Lucy Lawless was in consideration for one of the roles, and we know she could have pulled it off.
We are friends, aren't we? The very best.
Now, whether this was a remnant of the treatment where she and Eowyn were combined, or them thinking they needed to beef the role up to draw more women to the film, I'm not sure. Although the latter possibility is retroactively hilarious. They thought women wouldn't want to see this film. Really? And actually, Liv Tyler agreed. She felt it did Arwen a disservice to portray her as a warrior, as that wasn't the character Tolkien had written. She had signed on to play a woman who displayed her strength by giving up her immortality and accepting the pain that came with it for the sake of the man she loved more than anything. Not a woman who only became strong when she swung a sword and rejected her femininity for the sake of masculine values. She said in an interview with IGN, when they were really looking at this character, they wanted her to be a strong character. She is a strong character, but they were trying to figure out how to incorporate her into the film to be a strong character. And maybe they kind of thought, oh well, if she's a fighter, she's strong. And over time they realised that you didn't have to put a sword in a woman's hand to make her seem tough. That's little makeup of who Arwen is, and her sheer will and strength and love for this man was strong enough. And sure, they still had Arwen drawing a sword and defending Frodo from the Nazgul, but that's fine. This role was filled in the books by Glorfindel, who doesn't appear past this point, so giving the spot to Arwen to beef up her screen time is fine, and it's something of a misconception that elf women didn't fight in battle or that there were no female warriors at all in Middle-earth. And this especially sprang up around the time the Hobbit movies introduced Tauriel as an elf warrior maiden who wasn't in the books, and Rings of Power portraying Galadriel fighting in battle when she was younger. But Galadriel did fight in the First Age. All the elves did. Elven society allowed women to fight when needed, and even among the race of men there was Lady Harleth and her shield maidens, who could use some adaptation love, just saying. Credit to my friend Eileen who has all the notes, and many of us have been urging her to become a YouTuber too, so paraphrasing. Do elven maids have martial training? Yes, it is assumed all elves do. It's never specifically stated, but that's because elven martial prowess is assumed. And to the more general, are elven maids capable of fighting? Yes they are. They often don't, or are the last to take up arms both because they are fewer in number, as there's often 4 male elves for every female elf named and mentioned, and because elves hate violence on principle. On Arwen being capable of fighting, while she never does in the books because she lives in the Houses of Healing and fighting would diminish her ability to heal, She would have received the training to do it if she had to, and she's not just an elven maid. She's a princess, descended from both one of the last big elves left in Middle-earth and Galadriel, so of course she can fight. Orcs didn't just go poof after Sauron was defeated, so when travelling to Aragorn's coronation, she would have been prepared to fight any they encountered, as she would when she was originally planning to sail to the west during a time when orcs were running around. Tolkien may not have specifically said that women fought, but that's because the set pieces aren't narrated like action movies, and we still know the men fought. So who's to say that Arwen wouldn't do this? And what I personally love about this scene is that you instantly get that Aragorn and Arwen have a history and attraction, giving us a little hint before their story is fully revealed later. There are some who feel that this creates an inconsistency with her character where she's graceful elf maiden for the rest of the trilogy, but I'm not one of them. Again, Galadriel fought during the First Age, so did Arwen's predecessor Luthien, and Princess Idril the Silverfoot, and Princess Aradhel the Huntress. Elf women who are otherwise graceful, ethereal maidens picking up a sword to defend something, be it their home or say their lover's companion from evil, is a thing in the established lore. So outside of that, in expanding the role of Arwen, all they needed to do was adapt the story from the appendices, which according to Tolkien was essential to the main plot anyway, and the only reason it wasn't included in the book itself was because things were told mainly from the Hobbit's perspectives, which of course isn't an issue in a film, which can allow us to say have Arwen appear in dream sequences to offer guidance, and cut back to her in Rivendell talking with Elrond. They knew to simply adapt and tweak what was already there to give Liv Tyler some good material to play with. It is also somewhat sus that the complaints about Helm's Deep were that Arwen was there, and not that the elves in general were, as they weren't in the books, and Éomer was the whole time rather than showing up as reinforcements. There are layers to this discussion, but even giving Arwen aspects of Eowyn thinking that would make her strong, as well as comparing them over who is better for Aragorn, misunderstands both characters. Yes, Eowyn defies Theoden's orders to disguise herself as a man so she can fight in battle and kills the Witch King, but don't forget that Tolkien was very anti-war. And there's meant to be a sadness in the fact that this woman who has all these other gifts and virtues wants to achieve glory in battle and is something of a Death Seeker because Aragorn doesn't love her, with there also being the implication that the Witch King's aura didn't affect her because, as a Death Seeker, she couldn't feel any worse about herself than she already did. And after the ring is destroyed, she becomes a healer. So even Éowyn's story wasn't simply woman proving she can do what the men can, but of her living as true to herself as she possibly could. She took up the sword, helped win a major battle, and earned the glory she wanted, but she also realised that there was more glory to be found in helping people begin again after the war, and she pursued that goal too. And here's what the TV Tropes page says about how people compare Arwen and Éowyn over who is better. Modern fans tend to miss that Tolkien chose to write strong heroines whose dreams are portrayed as equally valid to one another, as well as that Arwen's choice is a difficult one and entirely her own, and no less right than Éowyn's choice to fight. I can remember binging all the making of features on the 2-disc DVD collection and hearing the passion in Liv Tyler's voice as she talked about how moved she was by the notion that Arwen would give up immortality and open herself up to the pain that could literally kill her because Aragorn is the man she loves and everything else is worth it to be with him. Hell, even I got a little choked up writing that. Like, sure, I love the battles. I love the moments between Frodo and Sam. I love all the same things everyone else loves. But I really love the story of Arwen as it unfolds through all 3 films. The absolutely beautiful scene of her recommitting her vow to Aragorn in Rivendell and giving him the Evenstar pendant in Fellowship, the hauntingly tragic vision Elrond shows her in the 2 Towers, and her seeing the rest of that vision in Return of the King and choosing to ride home. That is legit one of my favourite sequences in the entire trilogy. We love to talk about how Viggo Mortensen became Aragorn so completely that Peter Jackson even called him that for a full 30-minute conversation without realising, and that is true, but Liv Tyler became Arwen in the same way. Like, at only the age of 22, she fully makes you believe she's 2,000 years old. And to be specific, she zeroed in on her voice, working hard to lower it so she could sound more timeless. Apparently when her own father saw it, he thought she'd been dubbed by a different actress.
It's funny, when my dad saw the movie for the first time, he's like, whose voice was that? I was like, Dad, you jerk. It's mine, I'm an actress.
And honestly, for years I had no idea about the stereotype of American actors being bad at doing English accents, because I'd of course watched all the DVD extras where Liv Tyler is speaking in her normal voice compared to the accent she uses in the movie, and all the rest of the people doing great accents, so I was like, yeah, of course Americans can do the accent.
You have the gift of foresight. What did you see?
What's funny is that she wasn't a fan to begin with, and only had a passing knowledge of the books when she was cast, but she threw herself into preparation, and to this day can still remember her Elvish lines. In fact, falling in love with the language so much she asked if she could speak more of it in various scenes. And she speaks every line she has as if it's pure poetry, and conveys so much without words. Just look at this dream scene in The Two Towers. Another actress might have overplayed the passionate longing, but she opts to go with, yes, I long for you, but I know you have important things to do, but I also know you'll come back to me, so I'm happy to wait. This gentle wisdom in the romantic scenes is... I can't even describe it, or maybe I just did. And in the vision of Aragorn's death, see the dignified mourning there versus this reaction here. In the vision, she's prepared for the death, and there's this stoic acceptance, and possibly knowing she's made up her mind to die soon as well, but in the present, she's just been shown a glimpse of the man she loves growing old and dying, and heartbreak can literally kill an elf. So she looks as though someone has just ripped her heart out and she can't comprehend what she's experienced. There are layers upon layers to this performance, and it takes so much skill to fill in the blanks and convey that a smaller role has an entire other life whenever they're not on screen, which she does, and brings her in line with the rest of the main protagonists so that she feels fully developed. Obviously Cate Blanchett does that too as Galadriel, but come on, it's Cate Blanchett, water is wet, more news at 11. Other examples that come to mind are Andromache from Troy, as brought to life by the wonderful Saffron Burrows, and arguably Helen in the same movie, though Diane Kruger does get a little more. And of course, the reason this video came about is because I spent so long talking about the virtues of Princess Aurora from Sleeping Beauty, who is likewise a very Arwen-esque symbol of what good is fighting for, and why we fight to protect innocent people who can't do so for themselves. And I've compared Aurora to Disney's take on a graceful elf maiden before, but first I'll cite this video, The Forgotten Femininity of Arwen by Pilgrim's Pass, that suggested how the three women in the Lord of the Rings films correspond to three different idealized forms of femininity, with Galadriel being the queen matriarch figure for older women, and Eowyn of course being the warrior figure for women who aren't conventional, and Arwen being the guide. This does somewhat correspond to the Hecate sisters dynamic, with young and rebellious Eowyn being the maiden, and wise and powerful Galadriel being the crone, leaving Arwen as the caring and nurturing matron. This archetype doesn't show up as much in modern media for whatever reason, but a great example is of course the Spartacus series, which offered plenty of variety in terms of how women could be characters, and variations on these three archetypes, which I'll name after the Middle-earth women for the sake of now. You have your Galadriel archetypes in Lyta and Kore, and possibly Gaia from the prequel too, and then your Eowyn archetypes in Mira and Saxa, and of course Achelia from the recent House of Ashur, which is great by the way, ignore the haters.
Perhaps Idolog stands more formidable opponents.
And then our Arwen archetypes in Sura and initially Navia, and the reaction to the latter was so negative because it felt like they then forced her into the Eowyn archetype, rather like they tried to do to film Arwen. But our other Spartacus character who fits the Arwen archetype is Cybele, who got hit with similar criticism when Gannicus chose her over Saxa, and people missed the wood for the trees because of course she's one of my favourite characters in the entire series.
One thing that made a difference.
You have made all in the world.
Part of the deal with Cybele is that Gannicus initially believes her to be a naive little girl putting him on a pedestal, and tells her to stay away from him and men who might take advantage of her when she tries to thank him for saving her life. But then, when she's about to be evacuated, she insists on seeing him one last time to remind him of the difference he's made, and low-key encourages him to get out of his own way.
I do not ask you believe it to be true, only to accept that it is what I hold to heart.
And it's through being forced together while hiding from the Romans, and understanding that Cybele's faith and quiet wisdom is its own form of strength that helps Gannicus see his own worth, which then allows him to do extraordinary things. Both Cybele and Arwen fall in love with men full of self-doubt and or self-loathing and go, "No, you're better than you think you are, and I think the world of you for a very good reason." And of course with Aragorn it is movie exclusive, but it's fine. It's not an I can change him story, because the men aren't in need of being fixed. just positive self-esteem so they can love themselves for the virtues they already have. The ability to see the good in people and nurture it is quite underappreciated, and once you find someone like that, be they friend or lover, don't undervalue them. It's different from being a sycophant who tells someone what they want to hear. Arwen instead tells Aragorn things he needs to hear, and the fact that her word is the truth is what gives it so much importance. This gentle femininity is often mistaken for being submissive, possibly because audiences are so used to loud and aggressive female characters, and indeed male ones too, being presented as empowered or strong. But let's go back to the quote from Laurel Thatcher Ulrich. "Well-behaved women seldom make history. Yes, Eowyn defied gender tradition to slay the Witch King, and it was amazing. But this article on Hub Pages speaks about the importance of Arwen's sacrifice and how it carries just as much weight as everyone else's battle scars. It's Arwen who pays arguably the biggest price. She gives up her immortality to keep hope alive in Middle-earth. Unlike most of her kinsfolk, including her father Elrond, she still believes the world can be saved, even as her life is draining away because of the evil in it. She literally bets her life on the faith that Frodo and the others will destroy the ring and stop Sauron. And we also can't ignore that the elves were the ones who kept memory alive in Middle-earth by being immortal, and therefore able to remember things that humans and dwarves couldn't. And when they passed on to the Undying Lands, they were still preserving history by keeping those memories alive. And Arwen choosing a mortal life means that the physical memory will be lost when she dies. So she's not merely chilling in Rivendell while her man is doing everything. Think of the phrase, "keep the home fires burning" from World War I, which stressed the importance of making sure that there was still life to return to once the fighting was over, and maintaining a sense of normality, as well as keeping morale up. And that's what movie Arwen does, imploring Elrond to maintain hope when he's given up, and appearing to Aragorn in a dream, paralleling the letters soldiers receive from their loved ones back home, reminding them of what they'll be coming back to when everything is done. We can often forget, considering fantasy battles tend to glorify the epicness of the fighting and lean into escapism, which isn't a bad thing, but in real life, not everyone can or should be a fighter. Tolkien's setting is very anti-war, and that just makes a character like Arwen feel important. Why can't we show that it's just as valid to be an Arwen as an Eowyn, or indeed a Galadriel? I haven't watched Rings of Power, so I can't comment on the most recent attempt at bringing Middle-earth to the screen, but I was pro-Tauriel, and enjoyed that romance, so chances are my opinions won't line up with the majority if I ever do sit through it. So as I bring the plane in for a landing, I will once again bring things back to Disney, and touch on how I spent summer 2025 making shorts on all 63 movies in the official Disney animated canon, and when I got to Ralph Breaks the Internet and its infamous scene with all the princesses, I mostly enjoyed it with a hand wave of them being the theme park versions of the characters, and some genuinely funny jokes.
What works for some of us is finding a form of water and staring at it.
But one of these comments highlighted that they chose to portray Cinderella, the princess who spent her screen time rescuing mice from traps and treating them with kindness despite her situation so that they could all be friends in a tough living environment, as breaking her glass slipper and using it to threaten what appears to be a lost little girl. I know it's nitpicky, but I think it says it all over how we've somehow narrowed the possibilities of what female characters are allowed to be, or as one of my other female friends sighed recently about times before the only thing women were allowed to be was strong. And yeah, that opens up the choice feminism can of worms, which we don't want to do when I'm supposed to be wrapping things up, but yeah. I am all the more appreciative of that day in 2024 when I realised that Arwen was my favourite Lord of the Rings character, because now I can see what she really means to me, and that none of us necessarily have to be all one thing or the same thing, that you can still have a powerful love story and the two don't have to snipe at each other to call it development, and that you don't have to be extraordinary to justify your existence. Although, ironically, extraordinary might be the word to describe Liv Tyler's performance.
If I leave him now, I will regret it forever.
And such is the strength of it all that for me, the happy ending of the ring being destroyed and the Fellowship reunited is not complete until Arwen shows up at the coronation. The waterworks come even when I'm just watching it out of context on YouTube. If that's not the mark of a successful character or storytelling, I don't know what is. And I've been neglecting my self-promotion as of late, so I do have to drop an obligatory promotion for my fantasy book Joanna and the 12 Crowns. And fun fact, I used Arwen's dress here as an inspiration for what Joanna wears at the first ball. Available at the links below.